Welcome to Reroute Reflections, where we share our thoughts and insights about relationships, wellness, and business. We're your hosts, Becca and Andrew. We've been married for 10 years and have plenty of knowledge and experience in our relationship, the wellness industry, and the business world. Grab a coffee and let's chat.
Whew. That last episode.
Yeah.
That was pretty
That was
deep.
heavy.
That was heavy, yeah, seriously. We were actually recording this right after it.
Yeah.
Mainly because we just want to make sure we don't forget anything.
Yeah. But I hope if you listened to the first one already, you took some time, you took care of yourself. It was definitely a lot of heavy information. I know today, after we record, we're probably going to go get some A&W or something fun.
Yeah.
And just
that's our coping
chill
mechanism
for the rest of the day. Yeah.
Yeah, a little preview into what's to come later in the episode. So,
a lot of heavy topics. So
a lot of heavy
please
topics.
take care.
Do what you do to feel the feels.
Yeah. So if you didn't listen to last week's episode yet, that is part 1. So it is kind of important to listen to that one before this one because it's going to kind of all tie in together.
Yeah.
We're talking about our mental health journeys. Last week, we primarily just talked about our pregnancy losses and how that kind of precipitated the decline of our mental health.
Yeah. And I don't think we expected it to go as long as it did. I knew going into this conversation it was going to be a longer episode just because of how much mental health has been such a big thing in our lives.
Yeah.
And as we were going through, we've gone through a lot. And I think it's really important because not only does it shed light onto like your struggles and kind of what got you to where you are today, but also similarly kind of how it impacted me. So I think it's a really important piece to really understand what's going on in these big noggins of ours.
Yeah, and I think too, I think I had mentioned it in episode 1 as well, especially not only with mental health struggles, but even more so with pregnancy loss, you can feel very alone. And I think for us, especially having gone through 2 experiences that were just so traumatic, like required hospitalization both times and like drastic interventions, I think especially in those circumstances, it can just feel like, oh my God, like nobody even relates to what I'm feeling because when you do experience those things and when you do share it with friends or family and they also open up and they're like, oh, I've experienced pregnancy loss too. And I went through this and that and they're sharing and you're kind of like, yeah, but that not to minimize what they've gone through or to minimize what anyone goes through with pregnancy loss because it's horrible and devastating no matter what. But in that moment in time when people would share it with me, I was like, you still don't understand the extent to which something's happened to me. Like, I don't think I didn't think at the time they understood like the trauma that I had gone through.
And it's like the important thing, I think, in everything that we talk is that, people experience things differently and they perceive things differently and they're affected by things differently. You can take any 2 people, put them through the exact same situation, and both of them are going to have different perceptions. They're going to be impacted differently by it. And that's just kind of what makes human beings so complex. And so, maybe they did go through the same thing that you went through situationally, which they didn't. But if they did, they could still come out feeling like not impacted and the next year try again for a baby and all that other stuff. But that's not what happened to you. No. And I think I think we get into this habit of comparing, and we get this with anxiety a lot and depression. It's like, you think you have things to be anxious about? Yeah. Like, wait till you hear about me. I hope that doesn't come across here. It's really just about trying to explain that concept that you have to be compassionate and empathetic to people, because even if you'd gone through something similar, that has nothing to do with how they're going to perceive it and how it's going to impact them in their life. And so being open-minded and just making sure that you're there for people and just don't judge and don't feel like you need to one-up them, because I think that's so toxic.
Yeah. And I think that's something, I think at the end we're going to talk about what we've learned about each other and how we've dealt with these things in our relationship. But I think one of the most important things that we've learned with each other is, like with me, for example, if I am sharing my feelings or my experience with you about something, and this applies to everyone as well, but I'm just saying you because
that's what we're talking about.
I tend to talk the most about these things. It's like, I don't want you to share an experience in return to be like, "Oh, yeah, I've experienced something similar. I went through this and that." Because me personally, I feel like, "Okay, now it's about you. You don't really care about my feeling." What I like to have in return is you to say, "I can't imagine how you're feeling. Like, that must
Mhm.
be really hard. Like, let's acknowledge the feelings here, not, like, the experience."
Yeah,
And, like, let's
exactly.
I'm not someone who needs problem solving in the moment. I just am trying to get my feelings out there.
Yeah,
And we've
it's been
learned how to
yeah, it's been tough. Like there are rules of engagement, that
Yeah.
I think you need to figure out, and they're unique to every couple and unique to every person. And I think all we want, all my intention is about talking about this, broadly here is that people understand that, it's not a one size fits all approach,
Mhm.
at any time you're dealing with people. And the same thing goes here. What worked for us is not going to work for you, or it may work for you. Who knows? Some elements will, some elements won't. How we interact with each other and how we found ways to be successful in our relationship and navigating through our mental health challenges together as a couple is not necessarily going to work for you. But hopefully it gives you some ideas on things to try. And if they don't work, you experiment with other things and try to figure it out. And, we're still not perfect. There are still
No.
times where we get into arguments and I take those rules of engagement and shove them out the window and I totally forget about them. Let's continue on with the story because believe it or not, you're still not done with some of the traumatic experiences that have happened to you leading to your struggles.
Yeah, so we left off, I had returned to school again after I missed miscarriage and pregnancy loss. Had a DNC. I feel like things just kind of were like I was just on cruise control at that point, just trying to get through everything. I had dropped that chemistry course during reading week when this all went down, so I was in summer school as well. So I was just kind of keeping myself like super busy. Think, what I started realizing was really hard for me was having friends kind of share experience, like share their announcements that they
Mm.
were trying or that they were pregnant, and then starting to get invites to like baby showers and
Yeah,
all these
it was
things. And I
almost
was
like
kind of like, ooh.
yeah, because like COVID happened, right? And so like it felt like everybody just starting to procreate.
Yeah.
And good on you. There was really nothing else to do. But for us, given the situation that we were in, it was like, okay, we've not really dealt with the trauma that we've experienced to date, and we're now having it jump down our throats.
Yeah.
But
And I was in a really bad mental area already, like when this started to happen. I just didn't know it at the time. But at that point, I was already showing signs, I think, of starting to develop PTSD because I was avoiding anything pregnancy related. I was
mm,
blocking people on Instagram. I was
yeah,
unfollowing everyone,
as soon as they would announce,
reporting them. I was reporting like posts as like inappropriate if I saw it. Like
yeah,
I was, yeah, just avoiding anything and
it'd
everything.
be people
And
we'd be following for a long time, and all of a sudden they're
one
an
post, and it'll be like,
announcement.
"You're cut off. Get
Yeah,
out.
announcement like we're pregnant. Gone.
Unfollowed. Sorry."
Yep, sorry, do
Um,
not approve.
Yeah, and, I was starting to have some nightmares from the hospital experiences and all that, and I think, you know, again, when some of my friends had started announcing they were pregnant, I think that's when I started to realize this is a big issue for me. I can't avoid this forever.
Yeah,
We were at the age too where all of our friends are going to start having children.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. We had like a good at least 5 years of kind of a head start
yeah,
in marriage. I felt like we got married young. How old were
we
we?
were
24,
25.
25. So overall, like I feel like we had a head start. And then I felt like everyone started to get married, and then they kind of did the whole we got married next year, we're gonna have a baby.
Yeah.
And so we lost all that ground. Now we were at the same point as them, and now we were getting left behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think both you and I were at places where we were starting to reach like ahead in our mental health where things
Yeah.
were going really bad and yet we weren't able to really understand it yet,
Yeah.
but we would
100%.
be fighting all the time. We would be
Yeah. It started to impact my work. And my best friend who has 3 beautiful kids, I couldn't speak with
yeah.
because it was too triggering for me or whatever it was,
Hmm.
where it just reminded me of what I don't. And I went through that whole time not speaking to him because it was just too hurtful for me.
Yeah. But I think we had both reached a point where we were telling each other, "You need to find help, like, you need to speak to somebody else because I don't know how to deal with these
Yeah,
heavy situations anymore, and, like, I don't know what else to say to you," and,
right.
like, obviously, neither of us are professionals, and we're both dealing with our own stuff.
And I think now is probably a good time for me to get into my story. For me, I've struggled with diagnosed mental illness since high school with depression and OCD. I think for me, my mental health, depression is kind of a cyclical thing, right? I had the benefit of not having another depressive episode for years. And it wasn't until the pregnancy losses started to happen, I started to see these bouts of like aggression that would happen at work,
Mhm.
where somebody would say something, kind of off the cuff or belittling or something like that, that usually I would just brush off and move on, but I would actually talk back.
Right.
And it's not something that I do. I'm usually a very calm person, a very relaxed, happy go lucky kind of guy. And I just felt like I was losing a sense of self. And that was starting to interfere with our relationship too, where, like you said, we were fighting constantly. And I didn't know what it was. My self-esteem was low. I just felt like a shell of myself. It's like I was not me. And I can't remember what the catalyst really was that eventually made me go seek some help. But I ended up, talking or trying to find a therapist. And that was a challenge in and of itself, trying to
Yeah.
find the right person,
Mhm.
but I luckily did find a really great man who helped me, and having talked to him and then also talking to my family doctor, ended up coming out with a diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder, which was a new one for me I can add to the
Mhm.
list. So, I think what was interesting for me is like I didn't know what it was, right? I didn't know, I was having anxiety attacks as well. I had changed jobs during this time into a very intense group. And for me, anxiety, the trigger always is around, you know, feeling like I'm not pulling my own weight or I'm not doing a good job or something like that. I have such, strong ties of like wanting to be the best. And when I feel like I'm not, it really affects me. I think the element of like being in that job, which was really intense, very new, kind of starting at the ground level in a strategy group, which I'm not really familiar with. I'm more of an execution guy. Then having the pregnancy losses and things not going right there, it just everything started to kind of snowball to a point where I really need some help. And it got so bad at a certain point that I remember having anxiety attacks on a daily, like
Mhm.
just before work, after work, at night, and you just feel like if anyone's not had an anxiety attack before, it basically just feels like what you would expect a heart attack to feel like. You really do feel like you're dying. And to have that experience on a daily basis was just exhausting to a point where I lost all desire or motivation to work. Like I didn't care anymore. And work was so important to me. I always wanted to climb up the ladder. It was always my goal. It was like, say, 2 years in the job, move up to the next level, move up to the next level, move up to the next level. It was like just such a difficult such a difficult time. And, I just felt like to not have that motivation again, just I think for me, made me realize like something is really wrong. And it got to the place where, and I think we talked about this in the first episode, where I just had to take the break.
Yeah.
I had to leave work and I knew something had to give. I was in school part time. I was working full time in a really demanding job that was completely new and adding a whole other level of stress. And I was still trying to deal with the things that I've been putting off. And then COVID on top of everything else
Yeah.
was not easy and added other layers of stress. And so I think all of those things kind of bubbled up into, a situation where I was just a shell of myself and
Mhm.
I didn't even recognize the person that I was. And so with the help of my therapist and my doctor, we made the decision to, step away. I needed something to give and I had great support from my manager at the time. You know, if you're listening, I don't know if you are, but thank you for all the support that you gave me in such a difficult time. It was my dream to be in that group.
Mhm.
It was my dream, and it was so unfortunate the timing of like all of this stuff happening to me,
Yeah.
and I wasn't able to give the 100% of myself that I know that I was capable of.
Mhm.
Um, but that's just life. And
Yeah.
everything, I do like to think that everything happens for a reason. And, if it wasn't for all of this, I wouldn't be where I am today, running my own company. But I think for me, the job wasn't what did it. I think it just contributed to it. And if I didn't break then, I think it ramped it up.
Right.
So I feel like if I didn't break at that point, I think I broke sooner because of the stress of the job. But I think if I didn't have that job, it was still my other one, I do feel like I would have broken, but it would have been a year,
Mhm.
maybe, longer. I just think it would have been longer. There was just so much hitting me at the
Yeah.
time. So I'm gonna step away and try to get myself right. I honestly didn't even care about work. That was like the last thing on my mind. I just didn't care. I felt like I never wanted to go back to work. I was like, I can't go back. I don't give a shit anymore. Um, and and I thought I never would. And it scared the shit out of me. I'm like, am I going to be somebody who sells tie dye shirts at the beach? Sorry if you are somebody who sells tie dye shirts at the beach and you're listening. If anything, I'm jealous.
Yeah.
So, I just didn't know what was going on. Everything that I thought about my whole life, climb the ladder, become VP, do all these things meant nothing to me anymore. Like,
Yeah,
so,
your whole life was changing and
and I didn't
you're in
know,
a really weird like limbo
and I didn't
where
know
you
who
just
I
didn't
was.
know what the future looked like anymore. And I think that contributed even further to your
Yeah,
anxiety because
it
you
it
just you
it
didn't
was a
know anything.
spiral. It was just so debilitating, and there was a good chunk of time, which was that, like, 3-month period when I was on short term where I just didn't give a shit, and I just didn't do anything. So now, I'm off, and then you kinda start
Yeah, so I
therapy.
think in that summer of 2022 then, I had a friend who experienced a pregnancy loss and they knew my experience with it as well. So they called me and of course they were going through it and they were really scared and I was glad to offer, a listening ear and to try and reassure her that things were going to be okay and just trying to provide whatever support I could and to be helpful. And I'm glad I could be that person for that friend. So if they're listening, I don't want them to ever think that anything is their fault, because I'm more than happy to always take a phone call to help somebody. But what I will say about that is I think that for me was the straw that broke the camel's back. Um, where that was kind of the thing that finally precipitated some of my physical symptoms of PTSD that just became too much for me. I was already having the nightmares. I was already having some intrusive thoughts. I was already having a super high level of avoidance to anything that reminded me about the things we had gone through. And I think that was at the point where even then I started to experience more panic attacks and getting even more nightmares and then starting to experience flashbacks, which was a really weird sensation. And I know you had already been in therapy for a while, and I think you had started saying to me too
Mhm.
in those couple of months, like, I think you could use, therapy as well to help you with all these things because this is
Yeah.
this is not okay for you to be struggling through this alone.
And to be honest, I was, like, reluctant to do therapy, and I think it was because I had such poor experiences when I was a kid in high school and I
Right.
went through therapy. And I feel like there was just a disconnect, when you're a kid and especially, no fault on my parents, like they'd never gone through it. So they didn't really know the process of finding, a therapist. And then it was a lot easier, pre-COVID to find, a psychologist or a psychiatrist to be able to help you. Now it's like, trying to find,
It's a 3-year
a
waiting list.
diamond in sand, like it's incredibly difficult. A needle in a haystack is like a reference that
Mhm.
diamond in sand? Why is there diamonds in sand?
You can make diamonds from sand, I
You
think.
can?
Yeah.
Really? Wow. Who so I just had such bad experience. I was like, they're not gonna help me,
Right.
They're gonna give me meds and that's it, and then I'm never gonna talk, you
Yeah.
know? And I just think it was just a mismatch in terms of, the style of therapy,
Yeah.
that I had. Like
Yeah.
I do have an undergraduate degree in psychology, and so I learned so much, and part of the reason I did it was because of what I struggled through, and
Yeah.
once you come out of it, you're just like, "Wow, the mind is so complex," and I'm so eager to learn more about it. And of course, a part of me was like, "Maybe I can heal myself." That doesn't really work that way. You just kind of come out of a psychology degree being like, I have everything.
I have everything,
And I'm
yeah.
kind of on my way. I'm pretty close. No, but no, they're still bipolar. Fingers crossed. Maybe one
Yeah.
of these days I'll get that. Um, I think overall I just had such a poor experience. So the idea of me going back into therapy, I was just like, I don't. It's not gonna do anything for me. Also tried other therapists too, and it just didn't work for me either. Different style, and I was like, forget it. Like I'll figure it out myself. And but no, working with the therapist that I was working with at this point was a life changer for me. And I think that's why I was, now turning over a new leaf and being like, no, this is actually really helpful, and I think you could benefit from it.
Both you and I use Psychology Today, their
Yeah.
website. There's a way to kinda, like, find a therapist, near you
Yeah,
who.
like a whole repository of like therapists
Yeah,
in your area, and
you can choose what areas they specialize
really great
in. You can
filter.
choose,
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Very,
male,
very
female.
comprehensive.
You can choose what kind of communities they're a part of or if they're
Yeah.
religious or, like, the filters are very good. So you can be
It's
very specific with someone that you think you'll be comfortable with.
And that is one of the toughest things that I hear about, people who are struggling. Well, they know that they should get a therapist, or maybe they try to talk to a few people. And it's just finding that match is super important.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to do. It's not easy. I'd gone through several therapists before I found the one that worked, and click thing, and you just can't feel obligated,
To
and
stick with them, yeah.
if it's not working out, just, leave, and you need to make sure that you feel open and comfortable enough to be honest, and they're qualified in the area that you need help in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I find now that they're so busy, it's actually kind of helped to the industry, because now they're more willing to say like, listen, I'm not the best fit for you.
Yes.
And I've had some come to me and told me that,
Yeah, me too.
and I'm like, thank you for telling me this,
Yeah.
because like, and they're like, I'm really sorry. It's like, no, 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 thank you. I don't want you spending hundreds of dollars, with you, just for you not to be able to help me,
Exactly.
And so, yeah, it's gotten better. But I know finding a therapist that you can actually connect with is incredibly difficult. So Psychology Today was a
Was a
great
great
resource
resource. Yeah.
for both of us. Yeah.
And for me, it took a while. It took me a couple of months, I think, to find a therapist because we were kind of coming out of COVID at that point, and so I
Mhm.
think they were all just so busy. So I had phone
Yeah.
calls and emails, and they were like, we can't take anyone else on right now, or I don't think we're a good fit, or whatever, whatever.
Yeah.
But eventually I did find someone, and I think our first session was like August 2021 officially.
Hmm.
So it was about a year after you had started. Yeah, they're great. I love them. I love
Hmm.
therapy. I will always promote it.
I will always be in therapy.
Even just like touching in every month, every
Every
couple
Yeah,
months, like
bi-monthly, whatever. I think having somebody who is completely third party, you know, to you is super important, to just have that outlet, honestly.
yeah. So for me, when I started therapy with her, the first thing that we addressed in our sessions was the post traumatic stress disorder that was pretty evident was what I was going through. I am working with like a master of social work, so she's a psychologist. So she cannot diagnose, but we could go through like screening tools together to kind of give me an idea of what we think it might be, but it's never an official diagnosis. But at that point, I didn't really like care to have an official diagnosis. I
Mhm.
was like, I just need help. Like, I just want to get through this. So, we tried a lot of new and different techniques. We, we did just like general kind of talk therapy. We did different like trauma therapy, things like EMDR, which is uh, so eye movement desensitization,
I don't know.
something like it just helps you process different traumatic memories.
Yeah.
Essentially, you would come up with, a picture of one of those memories that you have all the time, like something that comes up in flashbacks a lot or in your nightmares and things like that. And you would go through it with them and you would essentially like watch a little dot bounce back and forth on the screen and feel your feelings and try and get into that
Stuff comes
memory.
up to the surface.
Stuff comes up and it's,
Yeah.
it's crazy. And then towards the end of that session, and sometimes it takes a couple of sessions to get through it all, that's where like the reprocessing comes in, where now you try and rewire your brain a little bit to think of it and not be so emotionally triggered. So, like,
Mhm.
of course, the memory will never go away and it will never be a 0 in terms of emotionally distressing, but it just
Yeah.
shouldn't be a 10 anymore. We kind of started more so with like the trauma processing, doing different techniques, things like even like brain spotting is like another one that we did. I think later on in our podcast we're going to go through kind of like our top choices for coping mechanisms. But I feel like we've kind of tried all of it. We tried journaling and exercising and all kinds of things. We did that. I think so. I started therapy in 2021. It was in 2023, I think that some of my depressive symptoms really started coming back. And even with all the therapy that I was going through still, I just feel like I wasn't seeing enough progress there. So I did end up having a conversation with my family doctor, and her and I went through the different screening and like diagnostic tools together. And she was able to diagnose me with depression and anxiety, and confirm that PTSD had, in fact, been what I was going through. So I did start medication for all of that. And honestly, it was so helpful.
Yeah, I was on the same medication
Yeah,
for a longer period of time.
medication buddies. And I think it's kind of ironic for me because I do work in healthcare, but I've always been someone who kind of sees medication as like the last resort. Like, even
Oh,
if I have a
yeah.
headache, I like refuse to take Tylenol or Advil until like I've had a headache for a few hours and I've tried eating, I've tried drinking more water, I've had a
Mhm.
tea, maybe I've laid down for a little bit. And then if it still hasn't gone away, then I'll be like, oh, okay, now I can take an Advil. And I can very proudly say I'm at a point where I don't experience any like PTSD symptoms anymore. Like, I think even, I mean, talking about it with the podcast right now, I'm definitely experiencing some, like just rib pain a little bit. I think something's coming up for me, but like I said, we'll take care of ourselves after this. So we'll be okay. But the medications worked amazingly. There was a point in, my mental health stuff where I was going to therapy every single week to get through this. And I'm similar to Andrew. Like I'll go every month maybe just to check in, see how things are going. But yeah, so it's been a long journey and I think
Mhm.
we're both in much better places. So
Yeah.
do we want to share some?
No panic attacks to date ever since,
Yes, knock
those
on
times in
wood.
January.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been great. We have Luna here.
I know. She's trying to give you
Mm.
some emotional
Oh,
support
I
now.
appreciate that, Luna. Thank you
Yeah,
very
little emotional support dog.
So,
So,
I
we wanna
mean,
do some, like, lessons learned?
yeah, I think that's a great idea. Let's talk about some lessons learned because I think we got quite a bit of those. So maybe I'll start. I think one of the things that I learned a lot from this experience was I always saw getting help or being honest or transparent about, mental health struggles was kind of a sign of weakness. And I think as I went through it and as I've kind of gotten to the place where, you know, I am today and finally in a place where I feel like I can share it, I feel like there is nothing that makes you stronger than going through what we went through.
Yeah.
And getting to a place where you can share it, I think is just at then another level.
Yeah, and I think, like, at least in my experience, like, anytime I have shared a hint of what we've gone through, like, online, like, I have shared online about our pregnancy losses and stuff before, we get so many messages saying, like, "I've gone through something similar too," and, like, "I'm so sorry that you had to experience this," and, like, "I'm always
Yeah.
here to talk," and you get so much support, and I've even had messages that were like, "I, like, appreciate you sharing because 'cause I've experienced something and I thought I was alone."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so even just, like, in those little aspects of sharing things, it is nice that you see that you're helping other people in the moment too. So, being vulnerable is a strength for sure. It's definitely
Absolutely.
really hard and really scary, but there's so many people that you're helping and you don't even know.
Yeah, it's so true. And I feel like one of the benefits of going through something as traumatic and stressful as what we've gone through is like you kind of come out the other end kind of being a better person. I think, that empathy and compassion is always something I used to struggle with as a leader. And, it really helped me kind of find that.
I think some of my biggest lessons learned were number 1, comparison is the killer of joy. I think especially having gone through PTSD, the comparisons that happened in my brain every time I Well, and that's why I was avoiding everything because
Right.
all I could think about was like, they have something I don't. They have something I desperately wanted and now I don't. And what if everything had worked out and like how old would my child be now? And I mean, the part that doesn't go away is like every year at the same time of year I'll reflect on that and be like, oh man, they would have been this old or this would have
Yeah.
been their birthday or this is
Every
when I
Mother's Day,
lost
every
it.
Father's Day.
Mother's days are hard,
Yeah,
things
yeah.
like that. But I think any of that kind of comparison is just gonna kill your joy.
Yeah, and even the comparisons that I was mentioning around, like, YouTube and, like, social media, and just
Yeah, and
sometimes
seeing other be happy and having a big, happy, healthy family, and you're just like, "Ugh,"
yeah,
I'm jealous at the end
yeah,
of the day, like, and I know that's what it is, but in the moment, it's hard to admit it,
yeah,
and you're just so mad that
yeah,
we didn't get that.
yeah.
But I think we're at a point where we've made decisions about how we want our life to be, whether it's with or without children, and we're happy with the decisions we're making, and we're trying to both be more present and live for right now.
Yeah, and that's it, right? Like, I mean, I think as of right now, in terms of kids, I don't want kids. Will that change? Maybe, but at this moment right now, and I think that was also one of the big lessons learned was,
Yeah.
like, stay in the moment. As much as you like to think that you can,
Control the future
and
and
tell the
plan things
future,
out.
you are not psychic.
Yeah.
You are not able to fortune tell. I think I talked about the box exercise in the first podcast that I did,
Yeah.
to kind of like prove to myself that I can tell the future. And so you can't do that. And the history can really only help prepare you, but it's not going to be indicative of what's going to happen. And so you just got to stay in the moment.
And I think maybe it's a little weird to just kind of mention it so casually, but I think something that kind of helped us come to these decisions too that we don't want kids right now was the fact that we did accidentally get pregnant last year around your birthday and it ended up everything ended up
Guess.
miscarrying. Yep,
Yeah.
surprise,
Guess what
surprise.
happened,
Didn't work
guys.
out again. However, a silver lining, no trauma. It was like,
Yeah.
I mean, not to minimize how devastating it is, but it
Yeah.
was a quote unquote normal miscarriage. Like,
Quote unquote. Yeah.
found out I was pregnant, and then a week later,
Yeah.
essentially, started
Didn't
bleeding
end
a
in a
lot.
hospital, which
Didn't
was
end in the
kind
hospital,
of
yeah.
wild.
Connected with all my healthcare providers to get everything confirmed.
Yeah.
Everything had kind of passed, and yeah.
It was almost like a test to see like whether we're in a better space.
Which I think, yes, like
Yeah,
mentally, I mean, now we got through it and I can think back on that and be like, you know what, that was
yeah,
everything's okay.
yeah.
Like actually, I didn't just push the feelings down, but I think what we learned out of that was we didn't want that.
No.
It was it was accidental. We're usually very careful with protection and all of that because of our history.
Mhm.
And um
Yeah, I think we
I
just
was
realized.
terrified. I was
Yeah,
terrified,
yeah.
but I also realized in that moment like I don't want children.
So
I'm
did I actually. And I think for me, I was kind of going back and forth a lot. And I think that moment for me was like okay, I don't.
right, because we had tried to kinda be happy about it, and we were like, "Oh, well, I am finally gonna be done school, and I'm gonna be
Yeah,
starting a
yeah,
job, we're gonna
yeah.
have 2 incomes, like, maybe it's the perfect timing,"
We
like
did get to a point where we were like, this could be great, I don't think we would ever be in a position where we would want to do it, and we would like proactively say like, "Well, let's have a kid.
right, and we were like, "Maybe this is just
You know,
God
God's
completing
way."
his plan."
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And then it just didn't work out.
but it
But,
didn't work out.
I think and I think overall, like, and I mean, I talked about like being compassionate and empathetic to other people, but I think one of the other things that we learned was this idea of like, just being compassionate to yourself. Like,
Mm,
you don't need to apologize for being who you are. And, how you choose to survive is up to you.
yeah,
And how you choose to do it may not be acceptable. Like maybe it's substance related. But if you need to do what you need to do to survive, there's no judgment.
yeah,
I've had my own, bouts of like substance related episodes, I think I'll call it.
yeah,
During this time, and I'm in a much better place now. But you know, and even smoking. I kind of picked that up as well as a habit as I
like
was trying to
cigarette.
smoking cigarettes. Yes. And it was just like, yeah, I was so upset with myself. You know, I was like, this is not who you are. Why are you doing this? And at a certain point, I kind of got to the place where I was like, you know what, you're just doing what you need to do to survive what you're going through,
Yeah,
and I'm not gonna pass judgment on you. you, me, you just got to do what you got to do to survive this,
Yeah.
and you don't need to apologize for that. And I am a huge advocate of that because it's really important. Like, everyone gives compassion. Like, people who struggle through mental illness is not people. They're usually like very nice and very empathetic people. You know what I mean? Like, they care too much, and that's why they're
Yeah.
struggling so much.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that all of us have in common is this, like, the lack of being compassionate to ourselves. We're
Right.
very first to be compassionate to others, but we kind of neglect ourselves. And it's really important to find time for, like you said, the self care and
Yeah.
whatever that is for you.
Setting those boundaries, whether it's at work
Yeah,
or whatever, like something for me is like one of my boundaries is like I need to go to yoga at least once a week because that is my form of self-care that
right.
genuinely is like my top choice. And that's like a non-negotiable for me. Like
Yeah.
in a week that I don't have it, I definitely feel the difference. And so, yeah, being firm with that. But I think that's a good segue into sharing our list of some strategies for wellness so we can
Well,
end it on a positive note.
well, I think we should. I think this segment is something that we're going to continue to do moving forward. Um, so, if you're not familiar with a tier list is essentially a list that you rank in tiers. And so, in our tier list in particular, there will be 5 tiers. There's an S tier, which is like
Super
super, super tier,
superior.
superior to all. It is the top of the top, the creme of the creme, creme de creme, creme de la creme.
Creme de la.
I don't know. I don't speak French. Then there's A, B, C, and D. And if you remember from grade school, it's basically like that. A is better than B is better than C, and C is better than D. So each time for our podcast moving forward, until we get sick of it or we think it's doesn't make any sense, we're going to be doing this.
A little tier list about something related to that episode's topic. Yeah, I
And
think
so
it'd
if
be
you,
fun.
yeah, I think so too. And we posted this on our socials so you can take a look as we're going through it. But we'll do our best to narrate this. So essentially, what we did is we each had our own little tier list of mental health coping techniques. And so Becca and we went in, and out of the list of topics, well, most of them are shared.
Yeah,
Some of them are
there's a couple
unique.
that are individual, but
Well, we have things like exercise, we have running, eating well, we have a digital detox, which is like basically turning off all social media, hiking, reading, art, sleeping, and getting together with people, breathing exercises, music, all of those
and
types
I
of
think
things.
all of these things are things that we have tried
Yes.
throughout our journey trying to, adjust our own mental health. So
Yeah. So any ones
happy.
you want to pick out in particular?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just gonna go through it from
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
maybe I'll start at the bottom because then it will reveal the best one at the
Yeah.
last. So
Okay, go for it.
I think in level D, the worst one is using alcohol as a coping mechanism.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um,
Maybe we'll do it together. And that I put we'll go D, C, B, A.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
yeah, let's do that. So I put alcohol at the bottom because it is something that I have used. I got to a point where I was drinking every day, and not that I ever thought it was like alcoholism or like a true problem. Like it wasn't interfering with my daily life. And I think a lot of it also just had to do, especially in the last month without having a job, like I would just get bored. And so by the end of the day, I was like, let's just have a drink. But one of my kind of like resolutions moving forward with starting a new job is to just limit it to like Friday, Saturdays,
Mhm.
because I don't want to rely on it.
I did the same thing. I also have weed and cigarettes listed in D.
Mm,
Um, you know, again, it's not something that I do routinely anymore. And I just think while it was a coping mechanism, it was short term, it was not
right.
long term, it
Yeah.
wasn't even medium term. And so it is a coping mechanism, but I don't think it's sustainable. So let's move on to tier C. I'll start. So for me, things like reading, art, sleeping was a tough one, but I put
Yeah.
it in here.
I agree.
I think for me, like, reading's great, art is fun, but as a coping mechanism, I feel like I'm just too wired for that kind of stuff. I just like it doesn't really help me
Quiet
cope.
your brain enough.
Doesn't, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I also put, like, arts and crafts in C. I put meditation, and I also put journaling. And I
Meditation, eh?
feel like those 2 are kinda, yeah, controversial, but I think for me, like, I don't believe meditation needs to be used sitting just quietly.
Mm,
For me, I experience like a meditative state when I'm doing more things that are within my S tier. And they're usually like activities where I get to just like tune into myself and my body and my feelings. And that to me is what meditation needs to feel like. So
mm,
I, yeah, I put meditation in C because I think like the one we all prescribe to, like what meditation looks like, isn't a great one for me.
yeah.
And same with journaling. I've tried it, I keep trying it,
Mm.
and I just can't stick to it. And I get too overwhelmed with like figuring out where to start. And it just,
Yeah, be compassionate about yourself.
yeah, it's just
That's
not for
important.
me. It works for
Yeah,
everyone else. It's
it's
fine.
fine. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's interesting. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, we'll go to B.
Yeah. So for B, I put exercise, like community and sleeping. Sleeping was also really hard for me because I love sleep.
Hmm.
I need like 9, 10 hours to like feel good. But I think the reason I didn't put it up that high is because as someone who like experienced like pretty severe depression, I think it can easily become like me staying in bed all day, like, oh, it's just self care, it's a coping strategy. I'm just gonna stay in bed all day. But like it's just making an excuse to stay there in my like sort of like vegetative state.
It's interesting you bring that up because I feel like with me, I have such like when I was growing up with OCD, it was very difficult for me with the obsessive thoughts, to be able to go to sleep, and that's kind of
Mhm.
when my mind started to shut off and like those thoughts started to enter.
Mhm.
And so for me, sleep was always something really scary.
Right.
And so maybe that's why unconsciously I put it to C.
Yeah.
No, that's right.
It's one of those things that's like a fine balance of
Yeah.
I definitely, so especially after this week of working full time for the week, it wasn't
Yeah.
even a full official week. Like I'm tired. Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
even today there was a bunch of things I should have done, but I was like, you know what? I need to give myself the morning to just sleep in and wake up slow, and
Yeah.
that's my self care for the week.
For me, B was pretty light, the lightest of the bunch. I put digital detox here,
Hmm.
because I've done it before, and yeah, I think it's really it's helpful,
Hmm.
It's not the best, it's definitely helpful. I also put hiking in this bucket, which is really weird because I have things like running and exercise. I guess walking would have been something, but I guess hiking and walking would have been the same thing, and I think, yeah, it helps, but it's not A tier for me.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
fair.
in the 8, I do have meditation. I did that a lot while I was really deep into therapy in those 6 months while I was, on short term and on leave, and it really helped. And I honestly should find time again because
Hmm.
it really helped me. Journaling, same as you, like, I've done it, again during those 6 months, and it was really helpful, and I just need to get back into that habit. And I got a really great journal. I don't know, it's just like a daily gratitude sort of journal. I was doing that, as my like, New Year resolution, and it just kind of fell at the wayside, unfortunately. Yeah, that's definitely something I don't do right now, but I did, and it really helped, and I really want to get back to it. I put golf in here as well. It's
Oh,
such a
nice.
yeah, it's a huge relief for me. Just being out in nature, doing activity, something I can get my mind off of like whatever I'm thinking about.
Yeah,
Because golf is something you just can't stop thinking about the
you
golf
have to
game. You have
focus.
to
Yeah,
focus. Felt like that was really good. And for me, eating healthy is also there. I always feel
yeah.
really good after eating a healthy meal.
Yeah, so for my A tier, I put the digital detox.
Mm,
I think just, what I learned is that, having blocked accounts or unfollowing things is actually like a totally acceptable thing to do. I
mhm.
just think the way that I was doing it and like the reasons behind why I was doing it wasn't like the healthiest way to do it.
Yeah.
But I still think it's way up there because you definitely do need to draw that boundary still. Like, they're obviously like certain accounts I still won't follow and all that because I just don't want to see all that content in my face all the time. And I
Yeah.
think that's fair.
There's nothing, yeah, whatever you need to do. And I think that's like the big kind of main point of today's discussion was like whatever you need to do
Yeah.
to like,
To get through.
yeah, for yourself, unapologetic,
Yeah.
right?
But I do think like we're just so glued to our phones nowadays that a good digital detox every once in a while is a good thing.
Yeah.
In my A tier, I also put reading because I
Mm,
love reading and I feel like when you and I had a few days over the new year to ourselves with just Luna and we like ran through some books. We like both finished a book, I think, and I was like, "Oh, it
mhm.
just feels so good,
Yeah,
so relaxing."
that was awesome. Yeah. And I really wish I could like, yeah,
Keep up
every
with
year.
it, but it's just so hard with
Yeah,
like
every year I
work
make those good read those goals and I
goals.
never reach it.
And then the last thing I put in there was music as well.
Mm,
I think one of the big things that did help me get through my PTSD was having a bilateral stimulation playlist. So it's like that sensation when you can hear the music like literally rolling from one ear to the other,
yeah.
and it like helps your brain kind of with EMDR doing like that the eye movement back and forth. It really helps you like calm down your central nervous system and all this, and it sounds so nice and it just like makes your brain feel good.
Yeah,
So
honestly.
music was a big thing for me.
All right, so let's go on to the final tier. So for me, this was the biggest one. So I think exercise is huge for me. I finally, been on and off again, especially after COVID. I had such a great routine before COVID, but now, it just feel like I've never kind of gotten back into it. Finally, I'm starting 3 days a week, working out again, which has been really great. And you just forget how important it is. For me, I forget how important it is. And so that's definitely top. Running as well, kind of similarly. Yeah, ran a couple of half marathons. I really enjoy running. That I think is my meditation, to be
Yeah,
honest. I also have therapy here, of course. Talking to somebody is really important. It's something I will never stop doing. Music is an S tier for me. I
nice. Yeah.
really find it such a great way to escape and, especially listening to some nostalgic tracks.
Wow.
Uh,
Showing your age here.
or just put the vinyl on and just you hear the crackle, just nothing better. Um, breathing. Breathing techniques for me is really important. It's actually one of the main ways I manage my anxiety and being around people,
Mhm.
so being social, family, friends. Yeah,
Yeah,
top for me.
you're more extroverted than I am.
Yeah,
So for you, being around people and family and all that kind of gives you that energy. Whereas for me, I not that I don't love my friends and family, but I'm just so introverted that like I need like a rest after
fair.
after a social event.
Yeah, and I'm like kind of like I'm definitely extroverted, but I'm not extra extroverted.
Right.
So I think it's because I totally get where you're coming from, and there are moments where I need to be away, and just kind of step away. And I find it's gotten more used to that about myself. I think before I was always like, I need to be in the middle and, getting away is kind of awkward. And now I'm kind of, again, unapologetically, doing what I need to.
Yeah, so for my S tier, I put hiking up there because I think for me, hiking or just getting outdoors, like even camping or just being outside for activities, I just love it. There's like nothing better than just having the sounds of nature, like no
Mm,
busy noises. You get to be with friends and family and like do an activity, I think is, yeah. Therapy, of course, is up there.
of course.
Breathing techniques I also have in number one because that also is something that helped me get through a lot of like panic attacks. Even still helps a lot with like anxiety. I do a lot of like the box breathing, if you know what that is.
Mm,
Uh, so yeah, that's for
you're a
sure.
box girl.
I'm a box breather girl.
Crazy.
And then
Makes
my
sense.
other two are, of course, eating healthy. I feel like I'd be a bad
Dietitian
dietitian
here,
if
so
I said otherwise, but
yeah.
I I mean, I think definitely, like, when we were kind of in the thick of it, we were eating more convenience foods and just eating
Well, that's a nice way to
whatever
put it.
eating, more junk
Yeah.
because it just was too much
I
effort for
almost
us
put
to.
junk food on this list, but I felt like I think we were talking it was like healthy eating is kind of like you know, but like, honestly for me, I think I could throw that on like an S tier too,
It just
or
feels
like
so
at
much
least when
better, yeah,
yeah,
to take
it's
ownership
probably
again of your
D.
food choices.
It's probably D, it's like short term,
Yeah.
rather than like long term. Yeah, and by short term I mean like the moment, like the next day you feel terrible.
Yeah. So and then my last one that I have up in the S tier is, of course, yoga. As I mentioned, that's kind of like my non-negotiable, has to happen at least every week
Hmm.
because, yeah, like I said, that's similar to your running is my meditation. Like it just
Hmm.
helps me reconnect my body. I get to focus on my breathing. Um, and I think that it helped me get through a lot of even my trauma processing because I had a lot of great teachers who would kind of point those things out in a yoga class where you're just noticing where that tension is in your body and focusing on like breathing through it to like loosen it up and like get that bad energy out of your body, out of your muscles. And I think it helps a lot. So
Yeah, and that was so we did kind of star the one that we think is like bar
top.
none, our top. And yeah, so that's yoga for you.
Yeah.
Running for me, I think is like I said, it's a combination of everything. That's like almost in the S tier. You've got for me music, you have like the exercise, you also have the meditation. So it's almost like everything all wrapped up into one
Yeah.
package. Yeah. So I think it's about that time that we
Wrap
wrap
it
up.
up.
I mean, honestly, I feel like we could have been talking about this for we joked about, potentially a three-parter.
I
So
know. It definitely could have been, but
so I think
obviously this is something we'll talk about again in the future.
yeah, it's omnipresent for us. And I think overall, if we're going to kind of recap some of the main points, I think it's just, if you are someone who's struggling with it or have struggled with it, be compassionate for yourself. Don't feel like bad about anything that you're doing in order to survive because, at the end of the day, survival has to come first. And
Yeah.
then you can kind of get to that stage where you have space for others. And so always kind of be there for yourself and be unapologetic about it. One of the other things is, just being honest with people around you,
Yeah.
communicate with
Y-
your significant other, your family, your friends.
You'll be surprised at how supportive they are.
Honestly, a
Because
lot of
I
that's in your
was,
head,
and I, yeah, a lot of it is in your head, but if you share these things, it not only just like helps strengthen your relationship with everyone else, but it makes you feel less stressed because you know you have someone to go to talk about these things.
Yeah.
And they'll often share things in return, and it just helps foster a good relationship.
And that's kind of part of this too. It's just like, find someone to talk to. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a therapist, but just talk to somebody. Like we talked about, we can't speak highly enough about, therapy as a way of like a check-in. We do check-ins, physical check-ins, for our bodies. Our mind is super, super important, if not more important. And so you have to take care of yourself, and having that check-in with a professional is something that I highly, highly recommend.
And I think that ties really well into some mental health like resources.
Yes. Where to go, what
Yeah.
stuff to do. I mean, I put a couple of here. Some of them are Canadian specific. First is Bell Let's Talk. So they do a number of different
Campaign.
activities, campaigns, and they do kind of a day every year where it's Bell Let's Talk, and they contribute based off text messages that are sent through their network because they're a communications provider. And they have a lot of resources on bellletstalk.ca. So I would highly recommend taking a look at that. Kids Help Phone as well is a Canadian specific resource for you if you're struggling with anything, especially adolescence. So definitely a great resource. And then jack.org is a great one for me. It's something that I've, been using myself for like resources. There's a lot of stuff on very specific topics. So men's mental health, mental health for Asian population, and so they get very targeted, which I
Nice,
find
nice.
is really, really helpful.
Yeah. So we hope that these last two episodes kind of inspired you to take care of your own mental health journey and to share it when it's needed. If you want to follow us on social media, you can find all of the links on our website at rerootreflections.com. Make sure to take care of yourself today after listening to these episodes, and
and
remember,
and remember, like, if you have any questions, about anything that we've talked about, feel free to let us know.
yeah, please, yeah,
Yeah.
let us know if there's topics you want us to delve into more. Um, yeah, if you just have questions in general, we're more than happy, obviously, as you can tell, to talk and talk and talk. So,
Hmm.
yeah, so let us know. And on that note, don't be afraid to reroute.
Love it. You took over the
Yeah, I
tagline.
did
Look,
today. All
I love
right.
it. All right. Well, take care, everybody. It was great talking to you, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Bye.
Bye.